The biting wind of late November whipped through the deserted streets of the industrial district, carrying the metallic scent of wet concrete and the heavy silence of a city that had forgotten how to care. Max, a retired detective whose sharp eyes were now mostly reserved for spotting injured strays, pulled his worn trench coat tighter against the chill. His only companion on these nightly walks was Hades, a massive German shepherd mix with ears that stood like sentinels and eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 cold nights. Hades was more than a pet. He was Max's anchor to a world he had largely abandoned after a high-profile corruption case had cost him his badge, his reputation, and his belief in justice 10 years ago. Tonight, the air felt thick with an unspoken tension. As they approached a narrow, dead-end alleyway behind an abandoned textile mill, Hades suddenly stopped. His hackles rose, and a low, guttural vibration started in his chest, a warning Max had learned to trust more than any police radio. Max clicked on his heavy flashlight, the beam cutting through the misty drizzle. There, huddled behind a stack of rusted oil drums, was a young woman. She looked like a ghost in the flickering light, pale, trembling, and clutching a vibrant red leather suitcase to her chest with white-knuckled desperation. Her silk blouse was torn, and a dark, wet stain was spreading across the shoulder of her coat. "Stay back," she gasped, her voice a fragile thread of sound. She looked at Max, then at the towering dog, her eyes wide with the primal fear of someone who had been hunted for hours. "Easy, girl. I'm not who you're running from," Max said, his voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone of a man who had spent 30 years de-escalating chaos. He signaled Hades to sit. The dog obeyed instantly, though his eyes never left the shadows at the mouth of the alley. "My name is Max. I was a cop once. Now, I'm just a man with a very protective dog. You're hurt." The woman, whose name was Lily, finally let out a breath that turned into a sob. She was an archivist for the city's historical society, a quiet job that should have been safe. But she had discovered something buried in the archives, original deeds and private journals belonging to the city's founders that proved the current Grand Waterfront Project was being built on land that had been stolen through a series of forged documents and a century-old murder. The red suitcase she held wasn't filled with money. It was filled with the truth, the kind of truth that powerful men like Sterling Thorne, the city's billionaire developer, would kill to keep buried. "They killed my supervisor this afternoon," Lily whispered as Max helped her up. "They made it look like a robbery, but I was in the basement. I saw them. I took the suitcase and ran. I didn't know where to go. Everyone in the city works for Thorne." Max felt a familiar, cold fire ignite in his chest. It was the same fire that had been extinguished a decade ago when his own department turned its back on him. He looked at the red suitcase, a beacon of color in this gray, dying part of town. He knew that taking her in meant inviting the storm back into his life. "My apartment is 3 blocks away. It's a fortress of sorts," Max said grimly. "If we stay here, they'll corner us." The walk back was a masterclass in urban evasion. Max used every shadow and service entrance he remembered from his days on the force, while Hades acted as their rear guard, frequently stopping to sniff the wind for the scent of expensive cologne and gun oil. They reached Max's apartment, a cluttered space above a hardware store, just as a black sedan began cruising slowly down the main street. Inside, Max patched up Lily's shoulder. It was a graze from a suppressed weapon, a professional's work. As the night wore on, they began to digitize the documents in the suitcase. The evidence was staggering. It wasn't just land theft. It was a blueprint for systemic corruption involving the mayor's office and several high-ranking judges. "This is why they couldn't just let you go," Max muttered, staring at a ledger that detailed payoffs to the very men who had forced him into retirement. "You found the heart of the beast, Lily." But Thorne was no amateur. By 3 a.m., the power to the block was cut. The streetlights outside went dark, and the hum of the city died away. Hades stood by the door, his tail stiff, a low snarl echoing in the small room. "They're here," Max said. He didn't reach for a badge. He reached for a heavy iron pry bar and a flare gun he kept for emergencies. He knew he couldn't win a gunfight, but he knew this building better than anyone. Lily, get to the roof. There's a fire escape that leads to the next building. Don't look back. What about you? She asked, clutching the suitcase. I have a dog and 10 years of stored-up resentment, Max replied with a grim smile. I'll be fine. The confrontation in the darkened hallway was short and violent. Two of Thorne's security team entered with silenced pistols. They didn't expect a 100-pound German shepherd to launch himself from the shadows of a closet. While Hades took down the first man, Max used the darkness to his advantage, using the heavy iron bar to disarm the second. In the chaos, Max fired the flare gun out the window into the street, lighting up the area in a blinding, crimson glow and setting off every car alarm on the block. The noise and the light were too much for a quiet hit. As neighbors began to peek through their curtains and the distant wail of sirens began to approach, alerted by the fire alarms Max had secretly tripped, Thorne's men retreated into the night. But the battle wasn't over. Max and Lily spent the next 48 hours in a secure location provided by a disgraced journalist who owed Max his life. They didn't go to the local police. They went to the federal authorities outside the city's reach. When the dust finally settled, the contents of the red suitcase sparked the largest criminal investigation in the city's history. Sterling Thorne was arrested while trying to board his private jet. The mayor resigned in disgrace. The dead-end alley where Max found Lily became the starting point for a citywide cleansing. Months later, Max sat on a bench in the city's oldest park, the one the suitcase had helped save from destruction. Hades lay at his feet, happily chewing on a new rubber toy. A shadow fell over them, and Max looked up to see Lily. She looked different, stronger, her eyes no longer filled with the shadows of the hunted. She sat down beside him and handed him a small, heavy box. The society wanted me to give you this, she said. It's a formal thank you. But this. She reached into her bag and pulled out a beautiful, handcrafted red leather collar for Hades. This is from me. Max looked at the dog, then at the girl who had changed his life by knocking on a door he thought was closed forever. He realized then that justice wasn't something you waited for. It was something you fought for in the dark alleys and quiet moments of life. He likes the color, Max said, his voice softer than it had been in years. It suits him, Lily smiled. It reminds us where it all started, in a dead end that turned out to be a new beginning. Max unclipped Hades' old, worn leash and replaced it with a new one. As they walked together toward the city lights, the retired detective realized he wasn't looking at the ground anymore. For the first time in a decade, he was looking straight ahead.